Welcome to Voices Against Violence, a Harmony House podcast to educate, empower, and serve as a voice for survivors. We aim to shed light on crucial issues surrounding domestic violence, offer support, and inspire action for change. Join us as we work together to create a community where all individuals can live a life free of abuse. I'm Charity Jordan-Rex, Prevention Program Manager for Harmony House.
Hey there, Kirsten. I'm Assistant Executive Director at Harmony House. Charity, today for Voices Against Violence, we are going over FAQs.
Frequently asked questions. These are the questions that we hear when we're out and about in the community. They're the questions that I most often hear when I'm out doing trainings and presentations. And so let's talk about them. This is what people want to know.
Dive in and give the people what they want. What do we want to know? Okay, so these are the ones that I get the most often. And Charity, I'm curious to where they overlap with yours.
Yeah.
So I think that one question I get very frequently is, how come people don't leave?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yes, I do hear that one a lot. I had someone in a presentation say one time, well, don't they know what's happening isn't right? And so why don't they get it? This is so misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And so I always start by saying, well, leaving is the most dangerous time. So that's number one.
Yeah. And let's unpack that for a second. Leaving is the most dangerous time. We had an episode recently where we talked about safety planning. So that is a really dangerous time for survivors when they are leaving their abusive partner. So we cannot minimize that when we're having this conversation.
Not at all. In my presentations, I usually say leaving is the most dangerous time. But one of the things that is a part of that is that fear of retaliation. Mm-hmm. And I did have someone ask me once, well, retaliation against who? So really, not just for themselves. Mm-hmm. And we say leaving is the most dangerous time because, number one, remember, this is all about power and control. Right. And so if the one person that an abuser wants to control is now getting ready to leave that situation,
totally threatens their power and control.
They've got nothing left to lose.
Right.
With that fear of retaliation, not just against themselves then, but against their children, against their pets.
Right.
I had someone say to me in a presentation, these comments might have all come from one presentation, but, well, don't they have friends and family that they can stay with? Well, even if they do, because part of this pattern of abuse is to sabotage those relationships and isolate that person from their sources of support. So even if those relationships still exist, if leaving is the most dangerous time for the person experiencing harm and they go stay somewhere, what does that do for the friends or the family where they're staying? It now puts all of those folks in harm's way.
So what we're talking about is, one, there's a safety risk to leaving. And then two, the emotional component to a safety risk is scary. That is a scary thing. So there's a lot of fear, and really valid fears around leaving abusive relationships. Something else to consider is, folks, when you are in a relationship, you have strong feelings for that person, strong romantic feelings oftentimes, right? And so sometimes the thing that is stopping somebody from leaving is they still care deeply about the person who is causing them harm.
Okay, let's unpack that briefly. So, when we talk about this, it's always important to understand it's not like people get into relationships and from the first minute, day one, it's just all abuse all the time. No, there might be a long time between getting into that relationship and abuse starting. Right. And then there's also the cycle of abuse, which we've talked about lots of times. So you have a triggering event, abuse happens, there's some reconciliation, that you go into this honeymoon phase. So in between, and there might be long periods in between some of that abuse. So in the meantime,
things are okay. Yeah.
At the start of that relationship, things might have been really good and you fell in love. You built a life with this person.
Right.
And so you know what that person looks like when they're not being abusive.
And you wait for them to become that person again.
Yeah. And you're hoping that they will stay in that mode.
And so
I think, it's almost like people forget how relationships work, but you're not going to leave. I mean, really, if think about this in our own life, in any relationship that we've had, you're not going to break up with someone at the very first thing that happens, right? You're like,
sure.
oh no, and that's under a circumstance where there's no abuse, but that's just not how we work. People operate often out of hope that things are going to get better.
Absolutely. It's so much more complicated than just leave, right? It's complicated. There's fear involved. There's feelings involved. There's safety risks involved. And also keep in mind, we're talking about an abusive partner who has likely belittled somebody, made them feel less than, insecure, doubted their own self-worth. So after how many times of hearing, you couldn't do this without me, no one else will ever love you, I'm the only good thing in your life. I mean, after a certain amount of time, that starts to sink in. And so then there's not only fear for safety reasons, but also, is that true? Am I anything without this relationship? Is this the only good thing in my life? Am I able to support my family or my children, whatever it might be, if I leave this abusive partner?
I mean, we can't underestimate the impact of that emotional abuse because you're in that toxic situation. And so, of course, that is going to impact you, and you're going to have that negative self-talk in your head. They're like, oh yeah, I can't do this on my own.
Right.
I need that person. And so that's a huge barrier to overcome. We haven't even gotten to the logistics though.
Oh yeah.
Which people don't understand. Why don't they just leave? Okay. Think about if you want to move from one place to another, how much money does it take to do that?
Of course.
I mean,
money, coordination, time off of work to move your things, to go sign a new lease. Like it's all of the things.
All of the things.
It is stressful in the best of times, let alone a very scary and emotionally charged time.
Yes. And so while we're talking about this, let's also remember that financial abuse is so often part of the experience for survivors. So it's never just one form of abuse that they're experiencing, that the abuser, they're using kind of all of the approaches, physical abuse, but financial abuse. So maybe that person, they might not even have a bank card or a credit card in their name.
Yeah.
They may not have access to their bank accounts.
They may not have been allowed to work.
So if you don't have the financial means to get a new place, take the time off work if you've been allowed to work, like what do you think people are going to do? It takes money to move and relocate yourself somewhere.
Let's also talk about pets, because this comes up all the time. People stay a lot of times because of an inability to bring a pet with them when they are seeking emergency shelter, or if they do have friends or family that they can go to, but the friends and family aren't able or willing to take in an animal as well. A lot of folks stay. It's a huge barrier for people leaving.
Absolutely. I have a sweet little dog. I don't know if I had to leave my house.
Right.
I don't know. I wouldn't stay somewhere that I couldn't stay with. And let's also remember that pet, while it may not be an official certified service dog, but it still provides some emotional support for not just the survivor, but if they have children, for the other members of that family. And so
yeah. And the fear of what might happen if you don't bring that pet. I mean, you talked about retaliation.
You don't want that pet to be harmed. And we certainly have heard those stories of abusers who threaten the pet or do actually harm the pet. And so these are all things that you have to take into consideration. One of the other things that I think is so common, but the average person probably doesn't realize, is that it takes documents to do anything.
Such a good point.
I still think back to the conversation we had with one of our case managers, Tasia, who said that 100% of her clients that she works with, they come to her without their driver's license or any kind of ID, without their birth certificate, without their social security card. Why don't they have those things? Because their abuser has kept them, has destroyed them. So where are you going to get an apartment where they're not going to want to see your driver's license? Where are you going to get a job? Where are you going to open up a bank account without any of those documents? So again, that's another barrier. And then even if you have the means to replace those documents financially, it takes time. You've got to get to the clerk's office, the Social Security, and that's just may not be feasible.
And it's navigating complicated systems, which we should say, like, if you are listening today and you're thinking, I need help accessing a birth certificate or a ID, and I've experienced domestic violence, know that we do have case managers in our outreach team and our shelter team that can help with those things too, because it is a complicated system. And if you've not had to navigate it before, it can be really overwhelming.
It's overwhelming and frustrating, again, under the best of circumstances.
Right.
And I think that's by design. But so all of these things, so why don't they just leave? I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. What are some of the other reasons that people don't leave other than the ones we've mentioned?
Yeah. So I think that what you mentioned around like the hope that somebody might change, I think that kind of also leans into another FAQ I have. And so I'm veering us off from the why don't they leave question,
Okay.
but it is, I think it's related, because then I think another question that we often get is it possible for people to change? Have you gotten that before?
You can't see the expression that I'm making, but yes, I've gotten that question. And honestly, of all the questions that I get, I think that's the one that I dread getting, that I hate to get, because sometimes I can tell that people are asking that out of hope.
Yeah, I agree.
Possible? But also, there's no good answer to that, because the short answer is, well, technically, yes, people can change, because again, this is a choice. It is a willful choice to exert power and control and abuse someone else. It is a choice. So technically, yes, someone can change, but huge but there, all caps. But
I know.
what are some of the complexities and the challenges around this?
Can people change? Yes. And it takes a willingness to change. It takes work. I mean, it takes a long time to unlearn behaviors and to relearn new healthy behaviors. That takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, and willingness to do it. And so I'm with you, Charity. When I get that question, I struggle navigating it, because the answer is it possible? Yes. And you deserve to be safe in the meantime. Like while that person is going through whatever journey they're going to go on, you deserve a safe, healthy relationship.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so you don't have to stick around to wait to see that change come to fruition. Maybe it will.
Maybe. And that's a big maybe.
It's a big maybe. Maybe it will, but you deserve safety in the meantime.
Yes. And, I think back, in case you haven't heard us recommend or reference Lundy Bancroft's book, Why Does He Do That? There's a whole chapter just on this. And he lists out, I think it's 12 or 13 things from his many, many years of working with abusers and intervention programs. Here are all the things that someone would need to do if they want to change. It's a huge list. And he also says that, almost like an addiction, this is something that they will probably have to continue to work. It's a lifelong thing.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and that person has to be willing to do that work. So
at
that
every point of the journey,
and also accept the consequences.
Right.
And that's a huge piece. So, if you are talking about someone who wants power and control, and, that comes from this deeply held belief that they are owed something, that they are entitled to something from their partner.
Privilege.
So that isn't something, that you're going to unpack and unlearn.
Yeah. After one incident, by the way.
Yeah.
So when someone's saying, I'm sorry, I'll do better after one experience, I mean, it is work for years and years of work and unlearning and unpacking. And unfortunately I'll do better, I'll get better. That's what keeps people in the cycle, is like that hope that you talked about of, they said that it'll stop. They said it'll get better. And then as we see time and time again, it happens again.
So, I mean, yes, it's possible, but it's not likely. And, we've gotten a couple of times questions about intervention programs. Batterer intervention programs is what they're often called. And, if we, refer people how successful they are, and honestly, it's nice. I guess it's good that they exist. But the problem with those programs, number one, is that folks are in them because they've been ordered by the courts.
Generally, yeah. Generally, it is not a willful so
they're not there because they are really looking to change. They're there because the court has ordered them to. So, maybe they can stay out of jail or something like that. So,
and the peer-reviewed evidence just shows that they're not effective.
They're just not. Unfortunate. But again, it's really a lifelong process, and there's so much that you have to do. So pivoting from this question, unless there's anything else you want to say.
No, it was related to that part of like, why don't people leave? And so I think part of the leaving process is asking that question is, but are they going to change? I think that's what we've witnessed in those trainings when people ask, do people change? Is it's somewhere in their process of deciding whether or not they're going to leave.
Just really quickly thinking about that, I feel like I just keep saying under the best of circumstances. I think of people that I went to school with who were bullies, who were jerks, and like seeing them later in life, like, oh, you're still that person. So even in that, like those people don't, like, you have to be willing to in a way, kind of completely change your whole worldview and mindset.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's not easy, and you have to be willing. Anyway. So one of the questions that I get, and I feel like this is kind of a myth as well about domestic violence, that this is an urban issue. So the question I get sometimes is, well, doesn't this, really just happen more in big cities? Does this happen here? Yes.
Here being Springfield and Greene County, Missouri, if you are listening elsewhere. Huh. So the question is this a problem here? Yes.
Yes, it is. Someone said to me one time, well, Springfield just feels like Mayberry. And if you don't get that reference, just Google it. But that means feeling like it's a safe kind of small town. It's kind of a big town that feels like a small town.
It does. Yeah. It's a really unique vibe.
And it's mostly a middle class demographic in the community, and so people don't realize.
Yeah, I guess that's tied to so many myths, right? Of who experiences DV, who perpetrates DV, right? Like that's there, because anybody can be a victim, anybody can be an abusive partner. So it's that's like a tangle of myths all in one.
Yes. So just to remind folks, maybe this is your first episode, so there isn't even a profile of an abuser, because literally any person can be an abuser, and so anyone can also be a victim. So it doesn't matter your race, gender, age, faith, income, education level, how big of a house, how nice your neighborhood is. Like, none of that matters. So absolutely it's happening here. And to piggyback on that, that also means that it's happening in your really small towns and your rural communities. I've had that question too. Well, is this a problem in like rural communities? Of course it is.
Right. Of course it is. It's happening everywhere.
It's happening everywhere. And actually what we know is that victims in those small towns and especially rural communities they're experiencing violence, and that violence is more extreme, and they're experiencing that more extreme violence over longer periods of time.
Generally with fewer resources.
Because it's a rural community.
Right.
And so they're more isolated just by the logistics of,
Yeah.
And I spoke to this in a recent presentation, and someone came up to me and they said, oh my goodness, thank you for saying that this is something that happens in rural communities, because I'm from one of those rural communities and I know that it happens. And I think it's it's this larger myth that people have about, I think, crime and other sorts of behaviors in general, that bad things happen in big cities, and your smaller places, like, it's just hunky-dory. No, things happen everywhere. And if you are in the Southwest Missouri or even Missouri region at all, then, let's just remind folks that Southwest Missouri, and Springfield in particular, leads the state in a lot of areas. So domestic violence is one of them, suicide, poverty, child abuse. So there is a lot that happens here.
Yeah. You're so right, Charity. And it's interesting that these FAQ questions are so tied to myth busting.
Yes.
Because, like, as we're going through it, I'm thinking, like, gosh, that's a myth that we hear a lot too. I want to hear your thoughts on, we've talked about, the FAQ of why don't people leave? And then I think they're really followed closely by, why do people go back? So if somebody gets through that process of where they've faced the barriers, they know that it's the most dangerous time to leave, all of those things that we discussed, and then they go back to their abuser. Can you talk about what you share in presentations and in the community when you get that question?
Well, I think that's really tied up in some of the things that we've already talked about. So certainly sometimes people go back because maybe that abuser has decided that, they're gonna behave for a little bit. And so again, it's about power and control.
Right.
And so they're able to kind of, I'm going to say convince, but things are good. And they think, okay, maybe this is going to be different.
Yeah,
How many times have you been in a relationship where you have said that, even if you're not experiencing domestic violence?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this time will be different. And I also think we don't appreciate enough that survivors are the experts on their lives.
Absolutely.
And so I often say this in presentations, that leaving is the most dangerous time, but also the survivor is the expert. And so they know what is going to keep them safest in that moment. And so even though it might seem completely illogical to us on the outside of that relationship, going back might be what keeps them alive and safe just a little bit longer.
It's also so common. So on average, we know that it takes about 7 times for somebody to leave in their abusive relationship and then come back to it and leave again before they actually leave. So it's a really common thing that happens. And like you said, is tied in with all of the things that we've already talked about what makes it so hard to leave. And
we haven't even mentioned kids at all, but that is another huge complexity to all of this. So if you have kids, you might be thinking, well, I don't want my kids to be separated from their parent, or you might be hearing that from an agency or from the courts that, oh, you can't, and so you might go back because that's the only way that you're going to be able to keep your children, because our courts, unfortunately, not all judges are really informed on this. And so maybe you're going back for the children, and so that you don't lose your kids.
Or you might be fearful of what's happening to your kiddos while you're not at home, or while you're if you're in, if you're out of the relationship, but they are not, you might be fearful and go back for that reason.
Yes. And we've said before that, leaving is not the end of the story. And I say this to audiences and presentations, like, if it were as easy as just packing up and moving out, we would have a big old purple semi out here in the parking lot. We would just go.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
We would just pick them up, move them out. Okay, job done.
Done. Check.
But that is not how it works. And so that's just really the beginning of a really long, hard, and painful journey for that survivor.
Yeah. Which is why safety planning becomes so important. So if you're needing some safety planning, check in with that podcast episode. Know that Harmony House is here as a resource for you if you are engaging in some safety planning or wanting to engage in some safety planning. I'm curious, listeners, what are your FAQs? Put them in the chat, in the comments. You know what I mean? In the comments of this podcast, email them to us. We want to know, what can we answer for you on this podcast to give you some more information about Harmony House services or the dynamics of domestic violence.
Yes, let us know. What questions didn't we answer? What's still circling in your mind? Let us know. Kirsten and I could have this conversation like all day, every day.
Well, that's good because you do. That's literally your job.
I mean, let's do it again on the podcast.
That sounds good too.
Thanks.
All individuals have a right to a life free of abuse. If you or someone you know needs help, please call our 24-hour hotline, 417-864-SAFE, 417-864-7233, or chat 24/7 with an advocate on our website at myharmonyhouse.org. Visit our website or follow us on our socials to stay up on the latest news and events. This is Voices Against Violence. Thanks for listening.